The smile on my sister Taylor's face didn't fall, it shattered. It was a perfect, polished mask of disbelief as a sound cut through the auditorium. Not applause. It was the sound of 300 men rising as one, their movements sharp, unified, and utterly silent. In their immaculate dress uniforms, the Navy SEALs all turned their attention from the stage, their gaze fixed directly on me. A rear admiral's voice echoed from the speakers, heavy with official gravity, for actions above and beyond, the call of duty, preventing the loss of an entire special operations platoon during Operation Serpent's Tooth. My father's posture, honed by 30 years in the Navy, snapped into an instinctive parade rest. But his face was a canvas of pure, dawning horror. The man he saw as his legacy was his daughter, the one on stage. But the men of naval special warfare were honoring the one he had made invisible. They were honoring me. To understand how it came to this, to the moment my family's world shattered in a storm of gold tridents and military honors, you have to go back 2 hours earlier, to the moment my father tried to erase me. The pre-ceremony reception at the Officers' Club was my family's natural habitat. My sister, Taylor, a brand new lieutenant commander in public affairs, moved through the room with the easy grace of someone who had always been the center of attention. She was the star, and this was her show. Holding court near the windows was my dad, Captain Robert Jensen, retired. His entire identity was a fortress built from the pristine image of his career and the successes of his children, or more accurately, the success of one of his children. He was in his element, regaling a circle of senior officers that included a quiet, decorated captain with piercing eyes. My father gestured proudly toward my sister. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he motioned toward me as I stood by. "And this is my other daughter, Anna," he announced, his tone dripping with dismissiveness. "She does something with data for the government over in Maryland." He leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial boom meant for everyone to hear. "Today I about Taylor. Her career our family's pride." The words landed like stones. It was the familiar weight of a lifetime of being the afterthought, the shadow in Taylor's story. This dismissal wasn't just a slight, it was the summary of my existence in his eyes. The quiet captain's jaw tightened just enough for me to notice, and he gave me a brief, unreadable nod. My father, in his proud ignorance, had no idea. He'd just belittled me in front of Captain Evans, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 2, my direct superior. My father thought he was just delivering another casual slight. He had no clue he'd just minimized my entire career to the one man who signs my classified mission debriefs. To understand the reckoning that was about to unfold, you have to understand the two lives I was living. To truly understand the divide, you have to see the two worlds I inhabited. They weren't just different jobs or different cities, they were different realities, governed by entirely different laws of physics. One was my family's world, and the other was my own. My family's world was on full display last Thanksgiving. The house was warm, smelling of turkey and my mother's desperate attempts at keeping the peace. Taylor was holding court at the dinner table, a newly minted commendation medal for a successful media campaign being the topic of the hour. My father raised his glass, his voice thick with a pride he never bothered to hide. To Taylor he boomed, and the rest of the family echoed him. To making the Navy proud. I watched them celebrate her, celebrate the story she told about the Navy, not the work the Navy actually did. It was a celebration of appearance, of good press. A little later, during a lull in the conversation, I tried to share a piece of my own life. I mentioned quietly that I'd been selected for a highly competitive joint task force assignment, a position I had worked for years to be considered for. My father turned to me, a polite but vacant smile on his face. He patted my shoulder, a gesture that always felt more like a dismissal than an affirmation. "That's great, Anna. More paperwork, I assume?" he asked, his tone laced with a familiar, weary condescension. "Just tried to take some time off. You look tired." Before I could even respond, Taylor chimed in from across the table, a sly grin on her face. "We can't all be out there making headlines, I guess. Someone has to keep the lights on." They shared a look, a small, private joke at my expense, and the conversation moved on. In that moment, it wasn't just about the joint task force. It was about the science fair trophy I'd won that gathered dust in the attic because it was the same year Taylor was voted prom queen. It was about the academic scholarships I earned that were treated as a simple expectation, while the family scraped together thousands to pay for Taylor's PR internship in D.C. It was a lifetime of my substantive achievements being weighed against her superficial ones, and always being found lighter than air. They saw me as the reliable, boring administrator, the quiet girl in the corner keeping the spreadsheets warm. That was their reality. Mine was a world away, in a cold, blue-lit room with no windows, buried deep inside a secure government building. An intelligence fusion cell. In here, there was no warm chatter, only the low hum of servers and the focused silence of people whose every decision carried immense weight. Months before that Thanksgiving, I was in that room, standing before a wall of monitors, my voice the only sound. On the main screen were the live feeds from a drone and the faces of a SEAL team, thousands of miles away, their expressions grim and resolute. My voice was calm, steady, authoritative, nothing like the hesitant daughter at the dinner table. The chatter indicates a planned ambush at these coordinates, I stated, pointing to a highlighted route on a digital map. It's a trap. My analysis of the satellite thermal imagery shows a second, larger force hidden in this ravine. I switched views, showing them the faint heat signatures they couldn't see. The target isn't the convoy. It's the rescue force they expect you to send. There was no room for error, no space for doubt. I continued, laying out the raw data and my conclusion with ice-cold certainty. I'm flagging this as a lion's gambit scenario. All SIGINT points to a deliberate misdirection. I advise redirecting your insertion point to the Overwatch position here, I said, marking a new vector. You'll have tactical surprise. The men on the screen didn't question me. They didn't second-guess my analysis or pat me on the shoulder and tell me I looked tired. The team leader, a grizzled master chief with a legendary reputation, just stared at the screen, processing my words. Then he keyed his mic. Copy, Oracle, we move on your intel. Oracle, that's who I was in this world. Not spreadsheet Anna. Not Taylor's quiet sister. I was Oracle, the analyst whose judgment calls were the line between a successful mission and a catastrophic failure. The line between 16 operators coming home to their families or ending up as names on a memorial wall. That single sentence from the Master Chief, we move on your intel, was a grant of trust and respect so absolute, it was something my own father had never been able to offer me. Living between these two worlds was a constant, gut-wrenching whiplash. At home, I was a ghost at the table, my life's work reduced to a punchline about paperwork. But at my real job, my word could divert SEAL teams and alter the course of a covert operation. My family measured pride in press releases, in public ceremonies, in the shiny, hollow victories that looked good on camera. My entire career was built on the silent, uncelebrated successes that no one, especially not them, was ever allowed to know. The burden of that silence was immense. It was a profound and crushing loneliness to know that your greatest achievements must remain forever unspoken to the very people who claim to love you. For a decade, I had accepted the silence. I told myself their validation didn't matter. But standing there at that reception, watching my father dismiss my life's work in front of my CEO, I realized they only respected the language of rank and recognition. It was time I finally spoke to them in words they couldn't ignore. After my father's words had landed, I turned away, looking out the window at the perfectly manicured lawn of the officers' club. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. It had been replaced by a quiet, cold exhaustion. It was then that Captain Evans moved to my side, his presence calm and solid. He didn't mention my father's comment, didn't offer a word of pity. He simply looked out the window with me and said, "Your award citation for the Serpent's Tooth Op was just declassified at my request. It will be read today. I made sure of it." In that moment, everything shifted. The years of quiet frustration, of biting my tongue at family dinners, solidified into a single sharp point of clarity. This wasn't going to be another emotional confrontation that I would lose. This would be a procedural correction. My goal wasn't revenge. Revenge is a messy, emotional affair. My goal was irrefutable clarification, delivered using the very system of honor and protocol my father worshipped. The beauty of it was that the plan was already in motion, and the trap wasn't one I had to set. It was one they would walk into with absolute beaming confidence. Weeks earlier, Captain Evans had submitted my name for the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. He knew my work, but he had also, through quiet observation, come to understand my family's unique brand of blindness. So he had his aide, a sharp-as-a-tack senior chief, personally call my father. The senior chief had strongly encouraged the family's attendance at the ceremony, framing it as a chance to support the Naval Special Warfare community and, of course, to be present to honor Taylor's recent promotion among her peers. My father, I'm sure, saw it as his due. An invitation from the command itself, a chance for his golden child to be seen by the Navy's elite. The official invitation had listed them as special guests of the command, a small but crucial detail that would have inflated their pride and ensured their attendance beyond any doubt. They believed they were coming for Taylor. They had no idea they had been summoned for me. There was just one final piece to put in place, my only direct intervention in the whole affair. I found the senior chief by the check-in table. He gave me a knowing look. I kept my voice steady, professional. "Senior Chief," I said, "can you please ensure my family's assigned seats are in the front row, Section Alpha? They wouldn't want to miss a thing." A corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. He understood immediately, without another word being said. Section Alpha wasn't for dignitaries or family. It was reserved for the active duty operators of SEAL Team 5, the very men who were alive because of my analysis. My family walked into that auditorium beaming with pride, certain they were being honored as the family of a rising star. They scanned the crowd for admirals and media contacts, never once imagining they were seated as honored guests of the one person they never truly saw. The ceremony hall was a sea of dress uniforms, the air humming with the quiet, potent energy of military discipline. Seated in the front row, my family was an island of smug satisfaction. My father, mother, and Taylor looked perfectly at ease, convinced their prime seating was a testament to Taylor's rising star. Taylor kept smoothing the lapels of her uniform, a small, expectant smile playing on her lips. My father, meanwhile, was busy pointing out flag officers he knew, leaning over to whisper their names to my mother. They were surrounded by the stone-faced, decorated operators of SEAL Team 5, but they saw them as little more than scenery. The ceremony began, rolling through a predictable sequence of awards for service and achievement. Eventually, Taylor's name was called for her Navy Commendation Medal. A polite, respectable wave of applause went through the hall. She stood, gave a gracious nod to the admiral and the crowd, and sat back down, basking in the glow of what she and my parents clearly believed was the peak of the Jensen family's recognition for the day. I watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching the final performance of a play I'd seen 100 times, knowing the script by heart. Then, the rear admiral on stage shuffled his papers, and the tone in the room shifted. A deeper silence fell. "And now, for a special presentation," he announced, his voice resonating with a new gravity. "Most of our greatest victories are secured not on the battlefield, but in quiet rooms by brilliant minds whose names are never known. Today we have the rare opportunity to honor one such mind." My heart began to beat a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I took a single, calming breath. The admiral began to read from a formal citation, his words painting a sanitized but powerful picture of a high-stakes operation in the Horn of Africa. He spoke of a compromised mission, a SEAL platoon walking into a perfectly laid trap, and a last-minute intelligence directive that averted a devastating ambush. The air crackled with tension. An analyst, working under the operational call sign Oracle, identified the threat with only minutes to spare, rerouting our forces and exposing the enemy's true position. I watched my father from the corner of my eye. He leaned over to Taylor and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Sounds like one of your media narratives." Taylor smiled, a flash of shared amusement between the two people who thought they had my entire world figured out. That smile was the last moment of their old reality. The admiral's voice suddenly boomed, filling every corner of the vast hall. This analyst's work directly resulted in the preservation of 16 lives and the successful completion of a national security objective. For her extraordinary courage and intellect, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal is awarded to... He paused, and in that split second of silence, I felt the weight of my two worlds colliding. Lieutenant Anna Jensen. A spotlight slammed down, catching me in its white, unforgiving glare. A sharp, horrified gasp escaped my mother's lips. Taylor's face, just a moment ago so full of condescending pride, went completely slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of utter disbelief. Her entire worldview, the carefully constructed hierarchy of our family, was crumbling in real time. Before I could even begin to stand, the SEAL Master Chief sitting directly next to my father rose to his feet. He didn't applaud. He turned to face me, his back rigid, and executed a perfect blade-sharp salute. Then the operator next to him rose and did the same. Then the entire row, a wave of silent, disciplined motion swept through the auditorium as, section by section, every single operator got to their feet. 300 of the most elite warriors on the planet, all standing in silent, unwavering tribute. They were saluting me. The sight broke something in my father. It wasn't his mind that reacted first, it was his body. Decades of ingrained training, of military instinct, took over. He lurched to his feet, his spine snapping straight, his hands cupped at his sides. He was standing at a rigid, involuntary position of attention. He was standing at attention for his daughter. The daughter he thought did nothing more than work with data. The daughter he had rendered invisible. In that moment he was no longer a father looking at his child, he was a retired captain in the presence of a proven and honored superior. My father had spent his life lecturing me on the importance of the chain of command. In the end, all it took was one declassified file for him to finally understand my place in it. As I walked towards the stage, the sound of the applause felt distant, secondary to the sight of my family. They were frozen in the front row, a small, shattered island in a sea of standing warriors. My father's rigid posture, Taylor's gaping disbelief, my mother's hand covering her mouth, they were completely and utterly isolated. The world they had built, with its clear rules and defined roles, had been publicly dismantled. After the Admiral pinned the medal to my chest, the applause died down, but the moment wasn't over. A stream of high-ranking officers and SEALs surrounded me, their handshakes firm, their words of congratulations brief but sincere. Their respect was a palpable thing, a shield of validation that I had never felt before. Through the crowd, I saw my family. They remained in their seats, ignored by everyone. No one approached them. No one offered congratulations for being related to me. They were simply irrelevant. A few minutes later, without a single word, they stood up and slipped out a side exit. Their departure wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, defeated retreat, a silent admission that they had no place in this world, my world. The story they had told themselves for so long had finally ended, and they had no new lines to speak. The months that followed were a sea change. The recognition didn't just change my family's perception of me, it solidified my own. 1 year later, I was no longer just an analyst. I stood at the head of a conference table in a secure briefing room, the wall behind me covered in complex diagrams and satellite imagery. The nameplate on the table was simple and clear: LCDR Anna Jensen, Division Chief, Special Projects. I was a leader now, guiding a team of elite intelligence officers and special operators, the best and brightest in the field. This room had become my true home. This was my real family. A unit forged not in broken obligation and dysfunctional roles, but in competence, mutual trust, and a shared, deadly serious purpose. We didn't need to perform for each other, we just had to be excellent at our jobs. At the back of the room, leaning against the wall, was the newly promoted Rear Admiral Evans. He caught my eye as I wrapped up the briefing and gave me a single, approving nod. It was a continuation of the respect I had earned. A silent acknowledgement that I was exactly where I belonged. Later that day, after a successful threat assessment, my phone buzzed on the polished surface of my desk. It was a long, rambling text message from my father. I scrolled through the paragraphs of excuses and regrets, my heart strangely calm. Then, one sentence stood out, clear and stark amidst the rest. "I was wrong," it read. "I didn't understand what real strength was. Your career is this family's greatest honor. I am so proud of you." I read the words over and over, the words I had once craved more than anything. The validation I had spent my entire life secretly hoping for. A decade ago, that text would have felt like salvation. I would have cried, I would have called him, I would have finally felt seen. But now? Now, I felt a profound and quiet sense of closure. The apology I had once so desperately needed felt like an echo from a distant life, a message arriving long after the war was over. The validation I required no longer came from him. It came from the respectful silence in the briefing rooms I now commanded. It came from the trust of the operators who bet their lives on my analysis. It came from the quiet confidence I now had in myself. My father's approval was no longer the key to my peace. I had forged that key myself, in silence and secrecy, through years of dedicated work. I put the phone down, silencing it without replying immediately. I turned back to the mission board, to the complex and vital work that lay ahead. My legacy wasn't going to be defined by my family's belated recognition. It was being built, right here, in this room, with the people who had always seen me clearly. My family believed a legacy was about the story you tell the world. I learned a true legacy is earning the silent respect of the warriors you fight for in the shadows.